Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. We've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect with each other and tap into various resources in business and career and mental health. But more importantly, this podcast is all about athletes transitioning out of sport. We interview former college and professional players, and we talk about their transition out of sports ultimately to successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. And the whole idea is to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. So excited today to have Keaton Nankivil. How you doing, Keaton?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Well, that's great. So Keaton played basketball in college. He played for University of Wisconsin. And then when he was done there, he was fortunate enough to be a professional basketball player over in Europe. And then ultimately, when he was done with that, kind of had, like a lot of athletes, had identity crisis. But ultimately, he got himself into venture capital. And he's been doing now, he's a senior principal at Alumni Ventures. So, Keaton, let's talk about playing sports growing up. How did that shape you leading up into college?
It was huge. I mean, it was like a lot of kids, it was the thing I poured all of my energy into. I was fortunate at a young age to be a big kid. Nobody can tell on video I'm 6'8", but I was like 6'5" in 7th or 8th grade already.
Wow.
I was just a big kid. I grew up in a single mom household. And so actually, like, for me, and I think for my mom, honestly, I don't want to put words in her mouth, sports was partly a way to have like a community take care of me and my brother as well. Get some coaches around us, get teammates, build a social network. I think it was a way to like embed us in social fabric. And then it just so happened that I became big, and like I just fell in love with basketball. To this day, it's one of the greatest loves in my life. It's just, it resonated with me, and it was something that I was fortunate to be like naturally good at some point. And so I pursued it hard, and how it shaped me. Every social connection I have in my life originates from sports. A lot of my habits of, I think, a lot of like perseverance, kind of fighting uphill, the basics of being on time, being respectful, willing to learn. I probably don't even understand all the ways that sports impacted me, but it was incredibly important leading up to college.
Yeah, and I hear that all the time. It's just such an impact on just all the people around you, the coaches, the parents, your teammates. You're right. I mean, just everything that hits the fabric of sports. So did you dream about being a professional athlete? And then was it basketball?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I played a little bit of football when I was young, and I was in the era where, and I think it's probably happened to a greater degree, but like single sport was
Yeah.
kind of a debate back then, and people were doing some of it. I was fortunate to play football until high school, but basketball was always my thing. And at a young age, I grew up in the same college town that I ended up playing in for college, but like loved the college team, always just completely admired the pro athletes. And yeah, this was the era of the NBA where there was a lot of like high school to NBA, and I was like, man, I wonder what that would be like. So it was an aspiration. I didn't know what it really took, but that was a huge goal of mine, and like one of the things that motivated me, not just to get to the pros, but it's just like to go out and play every day. And that's the biggest part of it, is stay after it every day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I joke around and say I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. Unfortunately, the talent wasn't there. So now I do podcasts and I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah, everybody finds their way.
That's right, for sure. So let's talk about, education. So when you were at Wisconsin, was there any education on just the transition out of sport as I talk about today? And I know probably when I went to school, for sure it wasn't there, but was there anything like whether it was workshops or classes?
There was, I have to admit, Wisconsin was very thoughtful about this stuff. It's become more and more formalized over time. So like it was, to their credit, available, maybe a little more ad hoc, but like they were thinking about it. What I'll say is, opportunities were put in front of us, but it's at a certain point in your life, you're not even kind of aware enough to accept them. And the story I always tell is, there was a former Wisconsin basketball player by the name of Ab Nicholas who had started a big financial firm, very successful, had given a lot of money to the department and the team. And he spent an afternoon with our team telling us about like financial future. And this was not, again, not like a formalized workshop, but this is one of the best in the business. And I remember sitting there and listening intently, but having no clue what he was talking about. And most of us didn't. And only decade and a half later did I really understand that opportunity and what it meant, and not remember the details. So there were things available, but I think it's inevitable for a lot of us at that age to not fully grasp them.
Yeah, and I think that is a big problem. I mean, a lot of times you got your nose to the grindstone, and obviously you're busy with,
Yeah.
your practices, your games, your classes, everything else. But it's so important. And I think, we've talked about at Alumni Direct, going with different resource partners into an athletic department and offering additional curriculum, not only for the current athletes, but for the alumni athletes as well. Because I think it's so important that, even we talk about sometimes from a recruiting perspective,
Yeah.
if you're a parent, you've got a high school athlete and they're looking at, let's say, 4 or 5 different schools, and they know that this one school has curriculum that's not only going to be for their college athlete, but also when they're done. I think that's really important.
Huge, huge. And as a person who's gone through that system, I have a young daughter now. She's only 2, but as I imagine and hope for a day where she's recruited, as a parent who's been through the system, of course, the coaches are important, of course, the facilities. But I would say to any parent, look at the athletic trainer, the strength coach, and the academic services. That's where you're really going to get the most interactivity. And those services are critical for any athletic department.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about networking and connecting. So especially while you're still playing your sport.
I didn't think about it. I didn't think about life after sports much. Ironically, I went to school to become a teacher. I was really lucky to have a lot of folks invest in me as a young person. And I thought my way to give back eventually will be go back to a high school or my high school and coach and teach. So I got my degree in K through 12 education. I was going to go be a Phi Ed teacher. That is not a networking heavy. This is not business you talk about all the time, but in the education field, it's not like the most critical thing. So I didn't really think about it. What I will say, like looking back, is that I do understand that you are, whether it's active or passive, you are constantly building your network. And my grandpa used to have a saying, don't dirty your nest. And I think that's been critical advice for me, where I the job I have today is from a relationship that started in high school, and it wasn't an active networking, but I think building a reputation of being somebody that has character and is willing to work hard came to the forefront 10 years after my playing or my high school career. And so that's a form of networking. Like our first and foremost job is to be a decent human being. And I think that's a version of networking that you have to take very seriously, whether it's in the job or the field that you want. That's another level. But just at a baseline, treat people with respect, be high integrity, have character. It goes a very, very long way.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the high school because I talk about that a lot. People just, if you start young, I mean, you've got your teammates, you've got your parents, your coaches. There's a lot of people surrounding it, and it's worth kind of having that mentality too, like you said, kind of like a paying forward mentality, just wanting to help others because you never know where it's going to come around. Like you said, 10 years later it comes around. You just might meet people, and sometimes I'll talk about like these young athletes, and they're like, "What do I have to offer to this multimillionaire?" And what they might have to offer is maybe that person wants to relive their childhood athletics. Maybe they have kids themselves that this person, the athlete, can help out. So I always encourage to look along. Like I was talking to a couple guys. One was a baseball player, one was a football player, and they were freshmen and sophomore in college. They still had a long way to go, but they said, "Man, I wish somebody would have taught me this in high school.
Yeah.
Just how to properly do that." It kind of leads me to another question too: is when you're at school, was there any type of cross networking amongst sports? It always seems like it's very siloed. The basketball players hang with the basketball players,
Yeah.
football with football, baseball with baseball.
Yeah, I would say by and large that does happen just because of the nature of being on the same schedule. Wisconsin's a big program across sports, not just basketball, but like football was fantastic at the time, hockey was fantastic at the time, volleyball, and you tend to be in this little bubble. At our school, the difference in kind of community came from facilities. So basketball, hockey were at one facility, the Kohl Center, and then football, track, soccer, a lot of the other sports were at the bigger facility in Madison called Camp Randall, the football facility. For me, my bandwidth was like, I could take basketball practice. I had some friends from high school that I lived with. That was enough for me. But I think at the same time, to just be in the same space as the hockey team and see what they're up to hear what they're up to, very valuable. And I am constantly surprised that even if I didn't know a football player, if I come across them years later in my career, I go, oh my God, we overlapped. I remember seeing you in classes. That bond still exists, even if we didn't talk a ton back in college.
Yeah, and I think that's the key because I always talk about it. I think athletes are, there's a certain DNA, there's the skill set, and skill set's different by sport, but still, like, you have a common bond. A lot of most athletes, they start playing when they're young, like it's 5, 6 years old, all the way through, And like I do a monthly networking event for my podcast guests. And it's really interesting because I'll have, I mean, I was telling you offline, I mean, I've had NFL players, Major League Baseball, basketball players, swimmers, wrestlers. But it's kind of cool to see, I might have like, say, 10 people on, but it's cool to see that athlete mentality. Okay, let's roll up the sleeves. We all have that affinity of being an athlete. How can we work together and help each other with our businesses?
Yeah. The other thing I think about is there's layers of affinity, right? And how many layers can I match with you? If I talk to another Wisconsin basketball player, that's 2 or 3 layers of affinity. Basketball, Wisconsin, maybe we're different era. If I was to come into that networking group and meet another basketball player, we have one layer, but there's a point of relation there. If I was going to talk to another athlete that was a hockey player, there's a layer, it's just different. And like maybe we can build 2 or 3, but you can relate with a lot of people on a number of factors. And so it is helpful to be in groups, especially with other athletes. Even if it's a different school, a different sport, a different era, there's something to relate on there. And that's kind of when you talk about networking, that's the foundation of it, is how do I relate human to human with somebody?
Yeah, I agree. And you hear all these stories too. I think that, like maybe missed opportunities where I remember one guy was talking on a podcast how he had, they went to some kind of event, and at the event was, let's say, like Bill Gates. There's somebody pretty famous like that, and they just kind of stayed in their corner, and they had an opportunity to interact with like some pretty powerful and influential people. So I mean, we definitely encourage people to network and connect. In your within your college space with alumni. I mean, did you was there any, like, say, networking and connecting amongst like the professional basketball ranks over in Europe?
Yeah, Wisconsin's great. I'm born and raised there. I'm biased towards it, but it's a really great place to live and be. So a lot of athletes that came to Madison to play would often like stay and raise their family there. If there were guys that were playing overseas, they would maybe camp there in the off season. So like when we would do our open runs in the summer for our team's training, it would be very common to have 3, 4, 5. I mean, we'd have a squad of the old guys to go against that were in their off season, and we'd play against them all summer. It was very, very common for us. And many of those guys, again, talking about like layers of relation, as I got into the overseas game, that was another layer for me to talk to a guy who I didn't play with at Wisconsin, but then we could go share those stories
Right.
and relate about that. So I actually built really good friendships with a lot of those guys after the fact. But because I played with them in the offseason, I knew them enough.
And that's the thing, like I asked before about the cross networking. Like I get, I guess the season, definitely dictates because people are busy during the season, so they might not have the opportunity. Because you think about like at a professional level, it's typically you wouldn't see like NFL players or Major League Baseball players that are necessarily interacting with each other. Although sometimes at the top you do, like the superstars, because you see them at the, let's say, the basketball games. So you might have the football and baseball
Yeah, you
players
have
are
a
sitting at the
gala or
basketball
something
games,
like that. Yeah.
right? Where you
The,
start seeing that. But
the
I
pro
think it's
level is
important.
actually harder. Sorry to interrupt, but the pro level is actually harder because you are, it's less common that you're sharing a facility. You're even more isolated in your schedule. So college is a really great environment to do some of that cross networking.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess at the pro level, it's more of like potentially like within your community, obviously,
Mhm.
because let's say like if you were in like Milwaukee and Green Bay and stuff like that, and just having the different sports teams kind of interacting with each other, like you said, at different galas or events or, charity events and things like that.
Yeah, it happens all the time. It's funny you mentioned charity events. There's a number of athletes, again, I'll talk about the Wisconsin community. I'm sure this happens everywhere, that get embedded in one cause or one event. For Wisconsin, like there's a former player who helps raise money for the Children's Hospital, for instance. And that's been a really great way to do some ongoing networking. I don't run any of those things currently, but like my friends and teammates who do, they get a group together to golf every summer, run an event. And that's actually been a fantastic way to stay connected with people for like a really long time, several years of doing an Easter Seals basketball game or a Children's Hospital golf outing. The philanthropic part of this becomes like very longitudinal for a lot of us. We can do it for many, many years longer than we played.
Yeah, no, definitely. So let's kind of switch gears to maybe along the same lines, but like alumni engagement. Obviously, it's something that's important to us at Alumni Direct. But like when you were there, were they bringing back alumni athletes, and not just for the homecoming game or like the tailgating, all that golf tournaments? Were they bringing them back to work with the mentor the younger athletes there?
It again wasn't as formalized as maybe they intended to be. At the time, we had somebody like Devin Harris was in the NBA. Michael Finley was kind of transitioning out of his NBA career. So we had connectivity to these people, but it wasn't a kind of the conventional partner you up with somebody system. I will say one of the things I will forever appreciate about Wisconsin, and I try to contribute to, is really good legacy of understanding lineage, I guess is how I put it. In that, like, people come back in whatever era they played in, they wanted to be a part of the current team the same way that, like, I should be better at getting connected with our current team at Wisconsin. So, not formal, but like guys coming in and out very frequently, always available. Yeah, you always wish that like you could really dig in and make it like a checklist, but the truth is it's very organic, and that's the way it's supposed to be sometimes.
Yeah. So just a quick note out to the coach. Keaton's ready to come back. So sign him up for the
Yeah.
mentoring program.
So I went back to school. I finished my pro career and I started getting my feet on the ground, and I ended up going to get my MBA, and I did it at Wisconsin naturally. And when I was there back on campus, I would go to the Kohl Center once or twice a week still and talk with those guys. Not in any like, here's my lesson thing. It was really just like I wanted to hang out for me and got to know some of the guys that way. And it was the best.
You got to live vicariously through them again.
Big time, big time.
Yeah, I think with alumni, it's got to be a two-way street too. I mean, some of the challenges people face are changes in coaches and athletic directors and all that, but still, I think it's important to I always bring up the story. In my case, I went to the University of Delaware, and I was on with a fellow alumni who's a Hall of Famer at school and played 10 years in the NFL. And we're talking to the athletic department, just saying, listen, tap us in. We want to help, we want to mentor, and they just talked about really not doing a good job of it, not having the bandwidth to do it. But I think that's so important, and I definitely encourage schools. I mean, we've talked to different smaller schools now, athletic departments, and they really want to re-engage their athletes and just try and finding ways to do that.
It's the 100th thing on their list, and I understand like to build that is not easy. I will tell you, like, it's also incumbent on us. I was out at NBA Summer League this past season. Fortunate for me, they do a technology event, so like I've gotten back in touch with the NBA folks through that. But I was out there staying at the hotel, and there was two Badgers who had recently graduated, a guy named John Tanja and a guy named Steven Crowell, who were playing in the Summer League. I hadn't been on campus for a few years at this point, so they didn't know me. And I was like, you know what? I as a proud Badger, like, I owe it to them to go up and say hi. And to be honest with you, I was nervous. Like, these guys were awesome, and I didn't know them. And I just said, I sounded like the crazy old guy, but I was like, hey, I played for the same coach 12, 15 years ago at this point. We're lucky to have that system at Wisconsin where Coach Gard, who's the head coach now, was an assistant when I was there. But they won't ever remember it, hopefully, but I hope it meant something to have another Badger in a random city come up to them. And it meant a lot to me to be able to, like, just say, like, thank you for representing the school and like, good luck with your career. So it's kind of on all of us to participate. We shouldn't be waiting for the athletic department to set it up or anything like that.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think it definitely helps, especially when we talk about transition at sport too. Just not only for the current athletes that are there, but again, a place where the alumni athletes can come back and just get the resources and the help that they might need. So let's talk about quickly. It's a controversial topic, NIL, name, image, likeness. Kind of give me some quick thoughts, positive and negatives. Obviously when you were playing, it wasn't around. It probably was, I don't know how many years later, but not a lot of years later.
Yeah.
For me, it was many, many years later.
Yeah.
But interesting to get your take.
My take is complex, probably. I don't know if I'll be able to articulate it well here. I'll start by saying when I was playing professionally, and even like the tail end of my college career, when I started to get a little more wherewithal, we used to say, like, okay, do I think it's fair that college athletes get paid? Yes. A lot of value generated, a lot of both for like the athletic department, but the school at large, or companies that are supporting, the media companies, lots of value generated. The conclusion we always used to reach was, but how? And I think this is like the big thing that not having NIL did, was just keep it out of the landscape and said, hey, if we can't figure out how to do this well, let's just leave it alone and there's no ambiguity. So I guess that's like my preface to saying, like, I'm a fan of NIL in the sense that players generate value, and it's fair to be able to compensate players for that. I do think we have a lot of figuring out to do on execution, and that will be an evolving thing. I'm not smart enough to know how to do it, and I think eventually it will settle out in a place that feels fair. We're kind of in the tug of war stage, and it's not just a two-way tug of war, it's a multi-way tug of war of the NCAA, the media companies, the schools, the student athletes, teams. It's very complex. I think it does propose a challenge. I'm less familiar with the Wisconsin basketball roster this year than I have been in many years because players are coming in and out. And I think
Yeah.
continuity is an issue. I think graduation rates will suffer. I could be wrong on that. It's still early. But fundamentally, I also believe that like players should be able to find their value. And, we have to just figure out how to do it well, keep the athletes in mind, keep their success. Both present success, great that we can write them a check this season, but long-term success. If I would have left Wisconsin after 3 years to go chase a check, I've actually gained more out of Wisconsin long term than probably any NIL deal would have provided me. So I just hope athletes are aware of the long term risk benefit analysis as well.
Yeah, and I think it's I always say that I guess the biggest issue I think is the lack of education of just people just not knowing, what to do, how to do it. We always talk about like even now because, down to the high school level, just it's a great opportunity putting aside the portal and all that and the money, just more looking at the deals, the sponsorship deals and things like that. But these kids not knowing, like, guess what, you got to pay taxes,
Mm-hmm.
and there's different things. So like if it's set up and there's the proper education, from at the high school level, the college level, I think that will make things better. And, I think everybody kind of has a perception of NIL. Again, it's always the biggest thing you hear people talking about is the transfer portal. And then also
Mm-hmm.
like the ones that are making $5 million across the thing. I don't, it's definitely got good things as far as building and becoming an entrepreneur and all that for across all sports, swimmers and runners and
Yeah.
football, basketball, the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, Juju Watkins, as we record this, just I think bought a minority stake in a pro soccer team, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, there's some really, and she's an outlier. She is a unique player. At the same time, I'll play devil's advocate. Like, because of how Wisconsin managed its scholarships, I never really had to figure out how to like pay bills in a conventional way. And then I played overseas for a handful of years where teams took care of, housing and car. I was 28 before I figured out how to pay a bill. And I think there's a downside to that too. I mean, if the worst thing in this is that people have to figure out how to pay taxes when they're 18, like that's actually maybe a benefit. I think it's a much more complex situation than that. But one of the unique things about being an athlete is it kind of accelerates your development. You're thrown into very adult situations very quickly.
Yeah, I
Meaning
agree.
you're in rooms with people who are, very sophisticated. You are put under scrutiny at a very young age, and learning to deal with that stuff is important. And the same, like I didn't learn how to pay taxes. I was confused as I was in Europe trying to figure out how to pay taxes for several years. And it wasn't until I was like an adult established in the States that I had to learn how to do that. I probably would have benefited from an NIL check. I would have had to figure out, how to pay taxes on. So
Oh yeah.
pros and cons, there's no perfect situation. I think the genie's out of the bottle. I think, it'll take several years for things to settle out. Ultimately, I am a fan of letting players earn their value and getting more players involved. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a messy process. And that's
Yeah.
the way it is.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So now you probably haven't gotten to watch any of these episodes. So I've got the questions and they're not hard. But
Okay.
my first question is, okay, if you could go back in time, kind of like a little back to the future action, what advice, 10 words or less, would you give to freshman Keaton at Wisconsin?
Well, for me, it's very specific. It would be a believe in yourself type of message. I was one that I struggled with self-esteem on the court, and I really let that kind of inhibit some of the stuff I did. I always wish that I would have mentally let myself go a little bit earlier and been okay with mistakes, been okay with some scrutiny, been able to kind of weather some of that stuff a little better. I played a lot of my career timid because I didn't like being punished as much as like, you know, I liked succeeding sometimes. Or how do I say that? It was harder to be punished than it was to succeed. So I would avoid being punished.
No, that makes sense. And then how about I go back to senior Keaton? What advice would you give him?
It would be, there'd be a same component, believe in yourself, because I was trying to make the jump to pro and didn't know what that would look like. But there was another component that is enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's a really special time, and the more you worry about the next steps, the less you can be present. So there would have been an enjoy it message there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that's come up, quite a few times in recent episodes. People just realizing like, hey, it only comes around once, and just really enjoy, seize the moment when you're there. So let's talk about. I guess in a sense you went through two transitions because you transitioned from college to professional basketball. But talk a little about let's just talk about your transition out of once you were done playing, you played your whole life. You played since you're again 5, 4, 3, 7, whatever it was. Talk about your transition.
Yeah. So I kind of tell people I was in the midst of an overseas career, kind of thought in my mind, I'll play 10 years and then kind of call it quits, see where I'm at financially and what I have to do after that. I was, on one hand, very disappointed not to make it to 10 years. Looking back on it, I'm very grateful to have played 5. So I got about halfway through what I wanted, and in the off season had a hip surgery that really just put me out. It was 6 months of rehab, and there was not a chance that somebody would pay me to come back over. I was a little bit out on my ass and didn't know what to do. Very fortunate that I was born and raised in Madison, so I could kind of do my rehab on campus. I had some credits to finish for my undergraduate degree. I didn't finish it in my 4 years at Wisconsin, so I was enrolled back in classes, but was flailing, candidly. Like, I had no idea what was next, and I was less motivated to go into teaching at that time, which is what I was getting my degree in. I was kind of burnt out and disenchanted with basketball because of the way my career ended, so I didn't want to go into coaching or just be directly in the game. But I didn't know what other skills I had, so I was kind of rescued again through a relationship that was born of something in high school for me. It was a guy who had known me for several years. I never knew him in a professional context, but he had started a small venture capital firm. He said, "Hey, I need an intern basically to help me triage emails." And I was like, don't know anything about business, don't know anything, don't have professional skills, but like basically need a foothold. What was kind of cool about this firm was it was proposing to raise funds, raise investment from University of Wisconsin alumni, and then invest in companies that had a University of Wisconsin connection. So when I talk about those layers of
Right.
relatability, I was like, I don't know anything about investing. I don't know anything about startups, but I do know Badgers. And so I thought, if there's any safe place for me to enter the workforce, it's here.
Yeah.
And so I took them up on it and had a ton to learn, but I really quickly kind of fell in love with startups in that atmosphere because it reminded me of being on a team. A basketball locker room is going to be 12 to 15 guys. Most of these startups are 2, 3, 4, 10 employees, and it just gave me
Yeah.
that similar feel. It took me, so I was an intern for 2 years unpaid. I mean, I had the benefit of coming out of a pro career, so I could take that. It took me 4 or 5 years to really start to feel whole again. So in that time, I was an intern, really dove into the business and watched Alumni Ventures was the firm like grow. I went back and got my MBA. I thought education is always a good investment.
Yeah.
Invest in yourself, learn something. I learned kind of more business etiquette through that and being in that environment. And then I rejoined Alumni Ventures again. This was 4 years after my playing career ended. I rejoined full time on the investment team. And so I've been around this company for 8 years at this point and watched it grow remarkably. But I will say it was like, there was a lot of like, who am I? And because so much of my identity was basketball, I had to really wrestle with that. Ironically, now it's several years later and I'm back in sports investing as kind of my primary mode. And I leaned away from my athletic identity for many years because it was really painful for me, like to not be known as a basketball player anymore. And interestingly, it's always stuck around. So like actually now what gives me a ton of credibility in sports investing is that I was a basketball player. So it's come back to the forefront of my identity. And the truth is like I realized I will always be a basketball player. It's who I am. It's who I've been
Yeah.
building towards since I was 6 years old. It looks a little different now. It hurts a lot to try and dunk a basketball now, but like that's still like DNA who I am.
Right.
And so there was a lot of like wrestling back and forth, a lot of talking with old teammates, a lot of us commiserating over like that weird cliff coming out of sports, how much our bodies hurt now. But I'm very proud of it at this point in my life. And like I lean heavier into it than I did 5 years ago because it's very meaningful to me. I think it tells a story in a very succinct way to go, I'm a University of Wisconsin, basketball alumni. That tells a story to people that I don't have to explain too deeply.
Yeah, no, that's great. And maybe several words of advice for athletes as they come upon the end of their career and look to transition out of sports.
Take your time, man. It hurts. It really, really hurts, but that's part of the growing process. So like let it unfold. You don't have to sit in the pain for too long, but it's going to hurt, and use that as kind of a growth opportunity. Rely on friends, rely on family. All of us are capable of getting to the other side in a nice way. So just like take your time, embrace it. It really hurts for a while, and then you kind of get through it to the degree you can. Plan ahead.
Yeah, no, that's good. Good advice there. So let's fast forward now and let's talk about what you're doing today, and maybe kind of how you've parlayed your athletic skills into what you're doing.
Yeah, so I mentioned I've been with this company, Alumni Ventures, both as an intern and then post MBA as an investor. Really cool firm in the venture capital space. So, if you're unfamiliar, venture capital is usually like very early stage startup investing. So think the people who invested in Facebook or Tesla or Airbnb when it was a really young company, far before what we know today. That's the world we play in. What I loved about this is what I mentioned earlier. Alumni Ventures was this really unique way to allow individuals who previously were kind of shut out from venture capital investing to participate, and we used alumni as our wedge to like galvanize community. So I entered through the University of Wisconsin fund. We've grown that. We're very present in a lot of university communities now and like alumni communities now. Several thousand investors. What's been really cool is like I still retain my Wisconsin identity, but the last couple of years, rather than focusing on the Wisconsin network, I've shifted a lot of my attention to sports. So I kind of lead our sports practice here, do a lot across sports. And more generally, we're kind of calling it humans first, as in all of the things in venture capital. We talk a lot about technology and software. To me, humans first is kind of what sports represents, is all the things that we do to be human, whether we travel, we go to concerts, we go to movies, we watch TV, we parent our children. It's all the things that like kind of make us human is the stuff that I'm looking at. Sports is a huge part of that because it is like this foundational part of our society where we play, we participate as fans, we view things for entertainment. That's what I'm spending a lot of my time on today.
Okay, that's great. And so now, is there still, like, even on the sports side, is there still that alumni component? Is it kind of like, whether it be Wisconsin or UCLA or Ohio State, is it basically alumni from that school are investing in alumni that have sports related businesses, but
Not
specific to that?
Yeah. So our primary audience is still typically alumni from the schools in our network, but more broadly, it's anybody who wants to invest in venture capital. The portion that I'm running is open to anybody who wants to invest in it. So there's no requirement for alumni. It still helps. So if somebody went to UCLA, it's an easier connection for us. If somebody went to Wisconsin, it's easier for me to speak to them. But it's not explicit. Interestingly, as you say it, like one of my visions as I went through my MBA program and had spent time at Alumni Ventures, I always thought Alumni Ventures builds around where you went to school, but there's a different alumni affinity that we talked about before this podcast, which is like if you were an athlete, you feel an alumni affinity that's like, hey,
Yeah.
we shared this.
Yeah.
And so I've always envisioned a world in which we create an alumni style fund for former athletes. But right now, what we offer is what we call our syndicate program. So anybody can invest in this, and it's no obligation up front. You can see the deals that I'm doing in the sports and kind of humans first world. But I would love for more athletes to get involved because this is a space we know intimately. And so we can support it really well and we're interested. We see the value. So, not explicit that you need to be an athlete to invest, but I am always encouraging more athletes to come check it out. And again, you can check out what we're doing with no obligation to invest and just see what we're up to. As long as you're accredited, that's kind of the regulatory hurdle that we need to pass.
Now, is there a platform then that they go to? Like, is it you have a site where that's where it happens and they can see the different deal flow?
Yep, we've created a great technology stack to support this. So if anybody's interested, go check out Alumni Ventures. The website is av.vc. On there, you can navigate. We offer a bunch of stuff. We do this in healthcare and defense and deep tech and a bunch of stuff. My area is called Humans First. Again, that kind of incorporates the sports angle. But if you're interested in technology and in early stage investing, we offer a ton, and the platform is very streamlined for you to get on and see the deals that we're doing, or invest directly in one of our funds, so we can put together a portfolio for you.
Okay, that's great. I mean, that makes it so much easier, and obviously it's national, probably more international as well, right?
Yeah, and like international. Again, there's just kind of the regulatory component that someone needs to be accredited, but we've gone through like great pains to build a platform that's easy for people to access. Our point of view is that a lot of value is created in the economy at the early stage, and people deserve to have access to it if they'd like. And so we've created all the technology to help make that possible.
Okay, that's great. And so, how can people find you?
So me personally, I'm trying to be very active on LinkedIn. I love hearing from people. And then, yeah, I look at Alumni Ventures as a platform. Like if you dig what I'm doing and our point of view on the world, and I have colleagues that are doing similar stuff in their field, I think of Alumni Ventures very much as almost a creator platform. Come see what I'm doing as an investor and follow our work. So find me there on Alumni Ventures, and you can sign up for one of our syndicates. Hopefully, humans first, my passion area. And then, like I said, I try and be active on LinkedIn. Other than that, social media is not really my game.
Right. Okay. Now, this has been great. I talk about each episode of just getting, I call them the nuggets, and just
Mm-hmm.
getting key information from our guests that can really help athletes out. And so you can find us at alumnidirect.com, the show Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journeys on our YouTube channel, as well as across all of the podcast networks, Spotify and Apple. And I just really encourage people to listen, follow, watch, and just, I always say we want to help at least one person, but I think it's a major issue today. Unfortunately, worst case scenario, you're hearing some recently, the gentleman for the player from the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you're hearing a lot of stories out there, and we want to eliminate those. We want to be able to provide the right resources to truly make an impact. So, Keaton, again, thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you. This is an awesome platform, and I encourage young athletes get engaged early, and us older guys and girls pay it forward. That's the thing that keeps the machine going.
I love it. Pay it forward. That's what it's all about. So thank you for another great episode.